Take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So I watched this podcast that Jordan Jensen did with this academic. Her name is Chiara Bottici. She is an anarcho-feminist, I guess, or she just wrote a book called Anarcho-Feminism. And Jordan Jensen did a podcast with her. I'm not sure how they met, but it's interesting to me because Jordan Jensen is a comedian who's been very anti-feminist for a while and bordering on right-wing, definitely some transphobic sentiments and like some Terf-ish sentiments, which they get into in this interview. And she was pretty stubborn about that for a while, but then seemed to have had a change of heart around the election where all of a sudden she felt like maybe some of the anti-woke stuff was getting a little bit too dark for her, like with Tony Hinchcliffe performing at the MAGA rally, and just the vibes were off. And so ever since then, she's been shifting in a little bit more of a leftward direction. And the only reason I highlight it is because I think it's interesting that that something has kind of changed her mind. And she never was like so far gone as to like advocating for right-wing politicians. But, you know, she like would use a lot of those talking points and kind of play into those narratives a little bit. And then it seems like she came across just a little bit of a change of heart where she started to doubt some of these narratives and also could see how it was harmful in the real world, you know, and like how our political situation is getting worse because of that type of rhetoric. And that, I think, is a really important pattern because I think there's a lot of people out there who are kind of callously, casually anti-woke or anti-feminism or just kind of anti-left-wing politics in general because they have a bad impression of it. And I do think it's kind of important to highlight how things are changing because of that type of rhetoric. So there's a couple clips that I wanted to play from this podcast and just talk a little bit about how it seems like Jordan's mind is changing and how that might reflect on like a broader portion of the populace that also might be changing their mind because of the political situation that we're in.
Okay, my other question for you, I had like a huge swath of time where I got I've like done a lot of work to undo my beef, but when a lot of men were transitioning to be women, I felt myself getting super hackly because I felt myself being like, you didn't go through what being a woman is. Why do I have to call you a woman now that you just look like a woman? Like, why do I have to? Because there was I remember I was like arguing with somebody about this who was non-binary, and I was like, I'm about to get my period, I'm sorry for being mean. And they were like, oh, me too. And it was the one moment in the conversation that we both were like, oh, what's up? And we saw each other because we both were PMSing. And I was like, if that goes, like if I'm talking to a woman who was biologically a male and they say, I'm a woman, see me as such, how do I get over the fact that what being a woman to me has been so difficult and so taxing, and they've lived an entire life as a man, and now I understand there's a part of me that's totally willing to be like, you are trans, you are very much, you've undergone, you know, hardships that I could never face, like that were so difficult I can't even imagine. But I find myself a lot of times being like, I don't know, there is like this hackles that raise when I have to be like, okay, you are a woman, that comes up. Right. And I've been like accused of being a TERF. I don't think I'm a TERF at all. I have a lot of friends that have transitioned from male to female, and I've seen that. I mean, I have a friend who was, you know, she was obviously was in the wrong body from a very young age, and when she became a woman, it was like a huge relief, and I saw that. But there's a lot of times where I find myself being like, where does feminism arise in this? You know, do you have thoughts on that?
So, two things. First of all, the point is that when we think about women, we think about some given essence, right? So, of course, there are experiences that make us similar. Like, you can say, okay, woman means, well, we're having our periods, and that's how we connect. But there's also other things that can connect us, like the fact that both women and trans people are the object of gender violence, primary target. Like, well, we can relate to that. Do you know what it is to walk in the street at night in a miniskirt and not feel safe? Yes.
Right.
We can connect on that, right? So that's why at some point when I wrote this anarcha-feminist manifesto, I was speaking about the second sexes in the plural. Like, both women and LGBTQ plus folks, two-spirit people, we're all second sexes. There is one sex that feels safer walking in the street at night, and there are the second sexes who don't feel safe. So for me, that's the question is what kind of alliances. I mean, there are trans women, trans men, trans people, non-binary. There's a whole variety of ways to feel embodiment around. Can we find alliances? I understand your point, but can we find alliances against patriarchy? Because if we bicker with one another, oh, this is, how much for a woman is this, how much for trans, so as a trans I've suffered more than cis women, you can't understand me. Can we find a point where we understand each other and that we understand that we're both being fucked up by patriarchy? Because otherwise what happens is that we are fighting and then we get Trump in power. And that's what kills me, because Trump and all the neo-fascists in power, they know very well that they have to attack female empowerment, trans issues, migration, ecology. They know very well that all these things go together. For me, for every trans person who's killed in the street, is also a part of my own freedom as a cis woman that is taken away. Because for every trans person who's killed in the street is the idea that because of your bodily appearances, because of the way you appear in the world, because of your gender embodiment, you can...
Yeah, and in that clip, she mentions the whole thing about how she doesn't feel like she's a TERF, but she feels like the context from a little bit before that clip is she was talking about having an argument with a non-binary person, but then towards the end of the argument, they both said how they were on their period, and that was a moment where Jordan was able to relate to this person, even though they don't identify as a woman. That was where Jordan felt some kinship. And then with trans people, that moment doesn't happen. Or with trans women, that moment doesn't happen because they don't share the same biological female traits. And I think that, she says that she doesn't think she's a TERF, but that is TERF sentiment. And she's saying, what does feminism have to say about the fact that a trans woman, isn't biologically the same as a biological woman? And that is kind of what she's reaching for there, is the trans exclusionary portion of radical feminism, quote, which is what a TERF is. So I wouldn't paint her into that corner of saying that she's committing to that ideology, but clearly all of the impulses are there. And I think it's good that she is showing some curiosity towards this subject. And the fact that she had this person on her podcast, I think, is a good indication. And I think Jordan Jensen is a good example of a person who's open to new ideas and is trying to find answers to these questions, because she has that sort of reactionary impulse in her mind that because a trans woman's life experience and experience in her body is different from her experience, as someone who was born a woman, that means that there has to be some animosity between the two, or that like trans women having rights as women is taking something away from you. That's sort of the end conclusion of that type of thought process. But you can also see that she is asking questions because she's looking for alternate answers to that reactionary question. And ultimately, despite the fact that reactionary questions, people who have reactionary impulses or who have become reactionary in their beliefs, you know, they're not pleasant to talk to, and they might say things that are unpleasant. But identifying somebody who's making an effort to understand deeper versus somebody who is not capable of understanding deeper or making the effort to do so is important. And so I think that's why I wanted to highlight Jordan here, because she is, you know, having this person on her podcast is an indication that she has a sense there are better answers to the questions that she's been asking for a while. And while she does have this kind of gender essentialism, and she says that it's based on biology, like she kind of hints at this thing at one point that if, you know, you allow women to run the world, so to speak, then there would be like biological issues that come up because of that. Or that there would be issues with women's behavior because of their biological predisposition. And this is the kind of like bigoted sentiment that Jordan Jensen has been espousing for a while. So it's not really surprising to me. But I think it's interesting how the whole concept of gender as a construct is so lost on her there, despite the fact that a big part of the personal identity that she talks about having hinges on the fact that she does not fit into traditional gender roles at all. And so when she's saying that she feels like there are inherent traits that women have that trans women don't, or that women, you know, leading the world in some sense would have certain biological implications, what she's really saying is that she thinks the gender roles of being a woman, the roles associated with being a woman, hold her back and hold other women back. But because she's not putting it in the framework of gender as a social construct, more so than gender as a biological absolute truth, she's not able to come to that conclusion. And you see her grappling for that conclusion. How can I essentialize myself in a world where my womanhood is more ethereal than biological? And so I can understand why that's a tough thing for some people to reckon with, but I guess it's a good thing that Jordan is wrestling with it.
Yeah, Jordan definitely has some things she's like openly wrestling with there. And, you know, I find it interesting the way she claims she doesn't think she's a TERF, but she's been accused of it and she does have these feelings. To me, what that says is a little lack of self-awareness. There's some self-awareness there, but I don't want to be a TERF, but I probably am, and this is why I'm working on it. You had an interesting observation there, though, that when she was talking about arguing with the non-binary person, and then they both talked about PMS, that's something she couldn't relate with a trans woman. She wouldn't have had that moment with a trans woman. But then, you know, it just boils back down to what her guest was talking about, that, you know, it's more just that you should ally with these people whether or not they can come from the same point of view as you, or you've had the same kind of suffering. You know, you've both had suffering at the hands of the patriarchy, and that is the real issue, and we need to ally ourselves against the patriarchy, capitalism, people like Trump in general. It reminded me almost of this. I used to, in high school, I really liked this movie called SLC Punk. I'd just gotten into punk rock, and it was just this movie about these punk kids in, I think it was Utah. Yeah, it was Utah. And there's this guy in the movie, a side character who had apparently, outside the movie, been gay bashed, you know, and he's talking to someone about it, and he's like, you know, I'm not even gay. And the guy's like, well, the problem with them giving you shit for being gay isn't that they're wrong about you, it's that they're giving you shit. And that kind of always stuck with me. That's the real issue there, is these people, causing problems in your life for what, isn't a valid reason, isn't the point. It's that they're giving you shit at all or making your life difficult at all, when you should just have more of a live and let live attitude.
Rescue the brown girl because our white girls are so free that they can go around and look like little Lolita for their entire lives. We don't oblige them to wear the veil, but we oblige them to get very painful depilation, very painful heels. Do we want to talk about high heels? Do you wear high heels?
No, I'm against them.
No, it's not that you're against it. Like,
I'm against
who
it.
designed shoes? It's mainly men.
Yeah.
Like, have they ever walked on high heels for an entire day? How much pain is there?
I don't understand the high heels. I don't understand women getting the fake nails, the eyelashes. I don't get this whole elongating of odd parts of our body
that's when you have to, it's like the makeup. You have to make up those why do we need to walk on those pointy little penis substitute? It is a penis substitute
because they like the idea of us walking on their balls in them.
As for Chiara Bottici, I enjoyed her a lot. I appreciated that Jordan had her on the podcast. I'm curious to know more about her. I feel like some of the descriptions she was giving of her worldview felt a little unsatisfying for me, or just lacking in some kind of perspective. She struck me as maybe a little bit of an ideologue, or just kind of an ivory tower type. And I don't know enough about her background to know if that's true, but it just struck me that some of the characterizations of the way, gender hierarchy works and stuff was a little cartoonish. And it's possible that she was doing that to dumb down the perspective, because she knew that she was talking not only to Jordan, who is dumb, no, just kidding, but Jordan is, new to some of these subjects, but also she's talking to an audience that might not be familiar with these subjects. So it's possible that she knew she had to slow things down, or put things into kind of colorful terms in order to illustrate the point. And I thought the best point that she made was how all of these divisions between what's a real woman, what's a biological woman, what's what is gender, all of this, and who's more oppressed, that gets in the way of organizing against the fascist right, like Donald Trump. And people like Donald Trump know that those divisions are helpful to them. That's why on the government website they change LGBT to LGB, because they know that the coalition between trans people and women, and anybody who's not a man or not a white man, or anybody who opposes the hierarchy of society in general, the patriarchy, the more divisions that exist between that possible opposition to the hierarchy, the better. I do feel like I don't know if the best organizing principle is the principle of patriarchy, because I don't know if that speaks to the experience of the maximum amount of people. Although obviously, as a man, I have benefited from that patriarchy to an extent, so it's possible that there's a reflexive self-defense in the fact that I don't think that that's necessarily the best point of organization. And it's possible that that's not her goal, is to use the patriarchy language as a point of organization, but more that that's just her worldview. But when she talks about all of these different groups organizing around, opposition to the patriarchy, I'm on board with that if that's the best way to organize the maximum amount of people. I don't know that it is, because I think the better way, the thing that more people can relate to is organizing against capitalism and against billionaire oligarchs. And so I think there's room for discussion of patriarchy, or even centering the discussion of opposition to patriarchy within that. But that was where I felt like maybe this woman's commentary, her perspective doesn't quite meet the moment either. But, you know, I could be wrong about that, and it could be that the principles of radical feminist theory are really what is necessary to oppose, you know, fascist capitalism as we see it right now. But I don't know if it's quite the antidote. So I guess I would like to see Jordan Jensen talking with different academics and different thinkers that are maybe a little bit more relevant in terms of class consciousness. I guess that's what I'm saying. There didn't seem like there was that much class consciousness in that woman's analysis, which could have just been that's not really what they were talking about, or, you know, whatever. That's not her focus. But that would be the only complaint that I had about this Chiara Bottici person. Other than that, I enjoyed her commentary a lot, and I thought it was great that Jordan was talking to her. So hopefully she does more conversations like that.
I agree, especially when it came to, well, without the patriarchy, we may not have capitalism, which is an interesting point of view, but not something I necessarily agree with. I need to read up a little more on those kinds of the origins of capitalism and stuff. I can see how they play into each other very heavily, though. She does seem like maybe she's coming from an ivory tower type approach. But like you said, she may have been dumbing stuff down for Jordan, just because I think, you know, Jordan's a little lay on these subjects, and she's actively trying to change these things, which is, you know, a good thing. She seems a little out of touch to me. Maybe it's from a class thing. She seemed a little older, and it might be a generational thing. I could see that being a part of things. She's, you know, a couple generations behind, has the right ideals, and is coming from a good place, but maybe a little bit out of touch. At the end of the day, though, I agree with most of what she said in that podcast, and I think the key is that we need to focus on allying ourselves and fighting against, you know, these evils in the world that are taking control and constantly pitting us against each other, making us fight amongst ourselves so they can come in and just take everything.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. It's the best way to support this channel. I'll be posting all kinds of exclusive content there, some exclusive podcasts, music, beats. If you like the beats that play in the back of these podcasts, all of that's going to be posted there. And if you have ideas for stuff that you would like to see as exclusive content, let me know and we'll try some things out.